After an argument that started with love and ended with humiliation, my son stopped the car, threw my purse on the ground, and drove away. No cash, no phone. Just the echo of his anger fading into the heat of Charleston's afternoon. I stood there 66 years old with my pride cracking louder than the traffic behind me. Then I heard a voice steady deep close to my ear. "Pretend to be my wife. My driver is coming. Your son will regret leaving you." I turned and saw him, a man with silver hair, dark glasses, and a white cane tapping against the curb. For a second, I didn't know which part hurt more, the cruelty of my own blood or the kindness of a stranger. Before I share my story, I'd love to know you are here with me and listening to me. Comment hi below or tell me where you're from. I love hearing how far my story reach. Sometimes knowing someone is there makes all the difference. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. If this story touches you, please hit subscribe and stay with me. My name is Vesperine Hale, and this is how one stranger's whisper changed the rest of my life. Heat shimmered over Meeting Street like a dare. The air smelled of tar and salt, and something burnt. Maybe my pride, maybe the rubber from Ronan's sedan as he slammed on the brakes and the tires screamed. Riverside Haven has on-site nurses' activities, grocery delivery. He said, voice clipped the kind he uses in boardrooms. It's safe. I kept my gaze on the windshield flecked with dust and sunlight. I'd rather be alone than managed. The word landed like a slap. He jerked the car to the curb beside the glass bus shelter, the one with the sun, faded, Visit Savannah poster throwing back my reflection in a harsh, sapphire glare. If independence is what you want, prove it. Go home on your own. He popped my door. Heat punched in. I stepped out, hip-twinging, mouth dry, every year of 66 suddenly heavy. He set my purse on the passenger seat to keep it safe, then pulled away. I stood there in the boiling white noise of cicadas and traffic until the tail lights vanished into the haze. Only then did I pat my pockets and realize I'd left my wallet and bus pass on my kitchen counter. My phone lit with 3%, a blue sliver of hope that blinked twice and died in my hand. I sat on the metal bench. It bit through the linen of my dress. 4 miles home. I measured it with my eyes the way I used to measure homework stacks, impossible, now survivable later. I pressed my palm to my hip, breathed, and thought about what freedom costs when people you love keep trying to invoice you for it. "Pardon me," said a low voice to my left eastern seaboard, vowels wrapped in velvet. I turned. Silver hair, dark glasses, white cane resting with surgical precision against the bench, a whisper close enough to feel. "Pretend to be my wife. My driver is coming. Your son will regret leaving you." I stared at him at the easy way his mouth shaped mischief and mercy at once. Why, I asked. "Because dignity is not a temperature you should have to survive alone," he said. And when I didn't answer, he lifted his chin just slightly, as if reading the room by listening to my breath. "Silas Mercer," he added, offering his hand straight toward mine without fumbling. His palm was warm. "Vesperine Hale," I said, because even humiliated I had manners. "Ves," he tested like a note on a piano. "Ves, my driver will address you as ma'am. If you prefer, Mrs. Mercer, he will oblige." The word wife rang in my skull like an emergency bell and a joke at once. The bus shelter glass flashed that same hard blue from the poster, as if the day itself were winking at me. Down the block, a black limousine nosed from traffic and slid to the curb so precisely you could have measured it in inches. The door unlocked with a soft click. The driver stepped out, mid-40s military posture tie knotted like a promise. "Mr. Mercer," he said. Then to me, with a respectful nod, "Ma'am." The syllable lifted me off the bench more surely than anyone's hand. I stood. My hip held. I slid my arm through Silas's, the way I had slid my arm through my husband's, years ago, not as decoration, but as agreement. The white cane tapped once more punctuation than aid. The driver, Mateo Alvarez, he introduced himself, opened the rear door. Cool air kissed my face. New leather and a trace of sandalwood rich restrained. As I settled in, a bead of sweat rolled down my spine and evaporated. Silas followed Cain across his knees, head tilted as if he could see the shape of my silence. Autonomy, he said softly as the car pulled away from the blistered curb, isn't a favor others grant us. It is a boundary we draw. Alvarez's eyes touched mine in the rear view. Not a conspiracy, more like a confirmation that I was not invisible. We passed the corner where Ronan had disappeared. I pictured his face when he'd tossed the word safe like a set of cuffs. The limousine hummed, turned beneath a canopy of live oaks, and Charleston's heat peeled back from the glass. I should have felt reckless. Instead, I felt returned to myself. My hand rested on Silas's sleeve. The fabric was cool, the thread count high enough to whisper. Somewhere between the cicadas and the air conditioning, my humiliation hardened into something else. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The corner of his mouth tucked like a man who hears a clock strike a new hour. "Your son will regret leaving you," he said again, not as a curse, but as a forecast. We crossed into a quieter grid of streets where the sunlight turned to honey on brick and wrought iron. I caught my reflection one more time, chin-lifted hair silver and stubborn, and thought, I will not let anyone write my ending for me. The limousine slipped through a set of iron gates. White columns rose ahead like a row of held breaths. Alvarez eased to a stop. He stepped out, opened our door, and said, "Mrs. Mercer," with a deference that made the skin at the back of my neck cool. I stepped down onto marble. Heat jasmine, the faint patter of a fountain somewhere unseen. Behind me, the bus stop on Meeting Street already felt like a photograph curling at the edges. I had no money, no phone, and suddenly no desire to apologize for taking the hand offered to me. I tightened my arm through Silas's. He angled his face toward the light as if tasting it. The cane ticked once on the stone. I thought, whose game is this? And why does the first move feel like mine? The Mercer house rose out of the historic district like an argument won generations ago. White columns, red brick magnolias, throwing glossy shadows over bunched hydrangeas. Inside the foyer gleamed checkerboard marble, a staircase curving with movie-set confidence, a chandelier dripping rainbows across the floor. If a blind man designed this place, he designed it for the eyes of the world. Alvarez guided us through the cool, perfumed hush. I noticed what wasn't there. No textured paths, no braille by door frames, no rubber bumpers softening sharp corners. Silas didn't grope or count or hesitate. He trailed 2 fingers along the banister, once not to find his way, but to mark it the way a conductor might brush a podium before the downbeat. "Garden room," he said, and Alvarez vanished ahead of us like a cue obeyed. Glass swallowed the far wall, releasing a flood of green lawns, cut to the comma, white iron chairs, a fountain tossing its own bright laughter. We sat amid palms and ferns in wicker that sighed under us. The tray appeared as if the house exhaled it. Bone-thin, china-silver spoons, aligned like soldiers' lemon biscuits, crisping the air with sugar and zest. Earl Grey, Silas said, and poured without spilling a drop. The pot was heavy, the angle perfect. I watched his hands find the cup's lip as if guided by habit, not guesswork. I watched the tea thread amber through steam. 30 years teaching literature, he said, not asked. I touched the edge of the saucer. "You read my resume in the bus shelter." He angled a smile. "You say than instead of then when you talk about time. Teachers do that when they love precision. Your vowels sit up straight. And you called the bus pass a pass, not a card that's regional. Also, you wear your wedding band, but you speak about your home alone so your husband is gone. My condolences." The word gone thudded between us with the soft weight of a pillow. 5 years, I said. Frank had an uncooperative heart. He nodded like a man who knows what it is to debate an organ and lose. "I lost mine," he said, and let the sentence hang, so I had to decide whether he meant person or piece of himself. We drank. The tea settled something jagged in me. The glass roof let the light do whatever it wanted. When I blinked, it was all sapphire again, the same color the ad had flung at me at the bus stop. Why the rescue, I asked. Men with drivers don't usually stop for women with no money. It wasn't charity, he said. It was theater. He set his cup down with a click, neat as a period. Your son assumed your helplessness. I thought a different scene might teach him otherwise. There it was, what I had felt in the car. Not pity, strategy. And the wife I asked. Why that line, because friend is invisible at a curb, he said. But a wife walks out of a car, and the world takes attendance. Out in the garden, a bird cut a black slash across the bright. I followed it with my eyes, and so did he. He shouldn't have. It was the smallest thing, a tilt of chin, the muscles around the eyes, tightening a fraction too early like a man bracing for a flash. He knows is coming. My pulse lifted. I looked for rails, textured mats, anything in this immaculate space that would have helped a person with no sight. There was nothing but beauty. Autonomy, he said, as if plucking the word from the air between us, isn't a prize we're given for good behavior. It's a home we build and defend. Age doesn't evict us from it. Tell that to my son, I said. He thinks a hallway handrail is love. Sometimes love confuses control with care, Silas said. He raised his cup again and without touching me, let his focus skim my left hand. You still wear your ring, he added. He was good to you. He was mine, I said simply. Alvarez's shadow crossed the threshold exactly when I needed a reason to breathe. Shall I bring fresh hot water, sir? Please, Silas said then to me. You'll rest here a while before home. Heat takes more from a person than pride does. I could have insisted on leaving. I could have stood wobbled, said thank you. Stepped out of the cool and back into the day that had spit me onto a bench. Instead, I folded the lemon biscuit between my fingers until it cracked like glass. I taught teenagers for 3 decades, I said. I understand performance. What's yours? His mouth flickered. Privacy, he said. An unfashionable costume. He leaned back, head tilted as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Losing sight taught me the trick of being left alone. The sentence slid over tile like a coin. I looked at the white cane lying beside his chair. I looked at the glass, no smudges, no fingerprints on the high places where a person might feel their way. I looked at the way he had named my life with 2 sips of tea and a sentence about vowels. You pour without spilling. I said softer than I meant to. Practice, he answered, matching my softness. His face turned toward me the exact second I smiled at the audacity of it. That laugh is new, he said. Keep it. I stood not ready to leave, not ready to stay. He didn't reach for me, and that of all things stilled me. May I suggest, he said, that you sit in the garden 10 minutes and let the sun tell your bones you're safe. The phrasing was so peculiar and kind that my body obeyed before my pride could object. Alvarez reappeared with the kettle, as if he had read the script from the next page. The steam curled like handwriting. Beyond the glass, the fountain's bright chatter stitched the room to the day. I'll get you home afterward, Silas said, properly not as a spectacle. The performance was for the street. This is for you. And for you, I asked. For me, he said, and the words were careful. This is a conversation I have not had in a very long time. 10 minutes became 20. We spoke of books, how seniors understand King Lear in a way children shouldn't, how teenagers catch the joke in Hamlet because they live on sarcasm and hope. He asked what poem I missed teaching most. I said the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock because it's about counting out your life with spoons and deciding too late to be brave. He smiled like a man who has already decided otherwise. When I rose at last, Alvarez materialized in the doorway again. Car is ready, he said, as if the house itself had whispered to him that my hip had started to ache. I thanked him. He didn't wave it off. He received the thanks like a gift set carefully on a shelf. In the foyer, the chandelier scattered 100 sapphire shards across the floor. I caught one on my shoe. You didn't answer my question, I said to Silas as we reached the door. Which one? Why ask me to be your wife? His hand found the cane. He stood taller. Because I needed a co-conspirator, he said. And because you looked like a woman who refuses to be escorted off the stage of her own life. Outside, the heat had softened, or maybe I had. Alvarez opened the car. Mrs. Mercer, he said again, and the respect in it made my throat sting. I glanced back at the house. No guardrails, no braille, nothing but light and careful beauty, and felt the question harden to a point. What does he truly see? As the limousine door clicked shut and the world turned to tinted glass and cool air, I wondered if I was stepping out of danger or into it. The fountain hissed. The cane lay across Silas's knees like a secret. He faced forward, but something in his posture told me he knew I was watching him. Tomorrow, he said lightly, there's a small dinner for the foundation. If you care to attend, Alvarez will collect you at 6. He said it as if the future were a place he'd already scouted for hazards. We'll see. I answered, though. The blue light sliding over the window had already said yes for me. We rolled toward the gates, toward Meeting Street, toward the quiet that comes after a decision you don't admit you've made. Just before the pillars swallowed us, a bird streaked across the hood. Silas's head turned a breath, too soon tracking it. The movement was tiny, clean, impossible to unsee. The question I carried since the foyer sharpened until it drew blood I refused to show. Did he truly not see, or did he see everything? And if he saw, why the mask? Why the cane? Why me? By the time Alvarez eased the car to the curb in front of my riverfront building, the streetlights were printing long ladders of gold onto the Ashley. Ronan paced the steps like a metronome set too high phone in hand-jaw working. The rear door opened on a cushion of cool air and ritual. Mrs. Mercer Alvarez said voice even as a level. I took Silas's arm and stepped out with the calm of someone who has decided to stop apologizing for existing. The night smelled like wet stone and boat fuel. Ronan froze mid-stride. Shame and suspicion fought across his face. Mom, he started, then swallowed whatever lecture he'd prepped. Con, I said gently, this is Mr. Silas Mercer. Silas extended his hand straight and sure. Your mother deserves to be consulted, not commanded. The words were soft, but they landed with weight. Ronan shook his hand because business training kicks in, even when sons are angry. I'm sorry about earlier, he said to me without quite looking at me. The bus stop. I was worried. I handled it wrong. I let the apology sit between us, not rescuing him from it. Worried is fair, I said. Unilateral is not. If it's about me, I'm in the room. He nodded like a man conceding a point he can't unhear. We're hosting a small foundation dinner tomorrow, Silas said as if he were mentioning the weather. Conversation, not ceremony. Mateo will collect you at 6. He didn't ask. He placed the invitation in the air and expected gravity to do the rest. Ronan's eyes flickered at the name. I could feel him run a quick internal search like any PR professional who knows a headline when he hears one. The Mercer Foundation, he said, too neutral. Education and accessibility, Silas replied. 2 fields your mother has served longer than most board members combined. Alvarez closed the car door with a hush that sounded expensive. The limousine slid away taillights threading into the night. Inside the lobby, the security glass threw a cool blue bar across the floor, and Ronan's footsteps quit their hard rhythm. I'm not trying to control you, he said. It feels like it, I answered. Then I'll change how it feels, he said, surprising us both. We rode the elevator without speaking. At my door, the intercom hiccuped a single bright beep as if to mark the moment. He lifted his eyes. Who is he really? A man who doesn't talk to me like I'm breakable, I said. A man who expects me to decide. Ronan exhaled through his nose the way he did as a teenager when he knew I'd won the point. I'll see you tomorrow, he said, then paused. And I'll make a call. I need to understand what world you're stepping into. After he left, I stood by the window and watched the river take the city's lights and drag them into something softer. I wasn't invisible. Not tonight. Rain polished the morning and left it smelling like citrus and electricity. A white velvet box waited at my door with a card tucked beneath silk ribbon. The initials on the envelope were simple. Inside lay a dress the exact blue of that tourism poster on Meeting Street, cool against my wrists, cut to a body someone had taken the time to measure in their mind. Under the folded bodice, a fine chain of silver nested like a breath you hold for luck. A single line on the card, armor, not adornment. I lifted the fabric to my cheek. There was a faint, unfamiliar cologne cedar after a storm. Somewhere in the quiet, a part of me that had been asleep sat up. The door opened on Ronan and the smell of takeout coffee. He saw the box, then the logo on the cream-heavy note card, Mercer Foundation. I watched his face do the quick arithmetic of a man paid to connect dots. "You know who he is, right?" he said already, thumbing his phone. 5 seconds then, Silas Mercer, founder of Mercer Vision, estimated worth with a B. And he scrolled. Legally blind since a degenerative diagnosis 15 years ago. He looked from the dress to me to the card. "Mom, you are not a prop in anyone's story, especially not a man with that much power." "Maybe I'm a co-author," I said softer than I meant to. He set the coffee down, worry surfacing as impatience. "People like that don't make mistakes. If you're in the frame, it's because he wants you in the frame. I want me in the frame," I said, and he flinched because the truth can be noisier than a fight. Evening brought water turned to blue glass along the Ashley in a building made of light. Alvarez pulled to the drop-off at Mercer Foundation Hall and was at my door before a second passed. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, and I let the title wrap the moment like a veil. I stepped out. The dress held me the way a promise holds. Silas emerged on the other side, no cane in sight, his hand resting lightly on Alvarez's shoulder as they moved through the glow. People turned the way people do, when money walks into a room and refuses to pretend not to be money. They greeted him with a deference that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite love. It was the quiet a room makes for a man who has changed it before. Glass threw our reflections back at us, a silver-haired man in dark lenses, a woman in ocean blue, and a current between them you could have lit a candle on. Music threaded the air. Crystal made that dry ringing sound when it meets crystal. "You clean up beautifully," I said, because I wanted to puncture the perfection with something human. He angled toward me like a sunflower following the sun. "Your laugh," he said, "makes the room turn blue." It was ridiculous and disarming, and not at all the line of a man performing pity. I let the corner of my mouth surrender. He turned precisely to meet it, as if he'd seen it coming. We moved through clusters of donors, and he did not bump, did not drift, did not reach with uncertain hands. When the crowd thickened, Alvarez's shoulder would brush his, and they would ripple around obstacles before they formed. It felt choreographed, but not the way helplessness is choreographed, the way competence is. "I thought the world would stop looking at me if it believed I couldn't look back," he said as we paused near a wall of glass that made the river look like a cut gem. It turns out there was nothing scarier than letting other people write your story. "I teach," that I said. Or I did. Point of view isn't just grammar, it's survival. "Show me your earrings," he said, teasing. I kept my hands at my sides. "What do you think I'm wearing?" "Sapphire drops," he said. "The right catches the light better." I hadn't touched either since I left the car. The air tasted different for a second thin as altitude. "Lucky guess," I said. "Luck favors the observant," he said, too smooth. The orchestra slid into something expensive and calm. I smiled at a joke from a woman in an emerald dress, and Silas turned toward my sound on the first syllable, not the second. A donor introduced his board chair, and Silas offered a hand already in the right place before the man arrived there. The room's blue deepened as the sun let go. Alvarez was there when he needed to be, and nowhere when he didn't, a shadow with good timing. "You'll sit at the front," a staffer said, and I didn't correct her about my name because some uncorrected things serve a purpose. Across the hall, a photographer lifted a camera, and Silas inclined his head away just enough to leave them uncertain. It was artistry, the way a magician invites you to stare at the wrong hand. My phone buzzed in my clutch. "Ronan, I'm outside. Don't panic, just watching. Also, call me after." He'd sent a second text with 3 links articles, a profile, an old interview. I slipped the phone back and watched Silas step onto a low riser to welcome the room without notes. He told a story about a kid in a South Carolina library learning to read large print books. He named teachers and bus routes and the specific smell of paper when it's been warmed by sunlight. His voice held the room the way the tide holds a docked boat. I applauded with everyone else and wondered why my heart hurt. On the balcony, I found a square of quiet lit pale by the reflection off the river. "You're good at this," I said when he joined me. Lenses off for a heartbeat, eyes steady, then back on. "Practice," he said, and the right people beside me. He looked at my face like a man reading something only he could see. The dress moved when the wind did cool along my knees. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you didn't flinch," he said. At the curb, at the offer at the mirror, the moment held up. "You stood in it." "My son thinks I'm in over my head," I said. "Maybe you're finally in the water you were made for," he answered. A server passed with champagne. The glasses chimed. He accepted 2 without hesitation and held one out to me without searching the air for my hand. Inside the hall, laughter rose like a tide over polished stone. I took the glass. "I should go," I said, "and leave before anyone writes an ending I didn't approve." "Mateo is at your shoulder when you're ready," he said. 6 tomorrow, I teased. "Or is that only for rescues?" "For whatever is next," he said, and I hated that the phrase warmed me. On the drive home, the city unspooled in watery lights. The bridge lifted like a stringed instrument against the sky. I kept my eyes on the dark window and the faint doubled image in it, me in blue Alvarez's profile. The river curled like a cat. We floated over the Ashley. The glass turned us into versions of ourselves we could study without consequence. That's when I saw it. Silas's reflection shifted from the soft blur of a man at rest to the hard focus of a man watching. He was turned toward the window lenses, failing to fully hide the open clarity of his eyes. Light slid across them and caught. It was a bright pin of proof and gone, but I had seen it. He was not looking inward. He was looking out. The river kept its counsel. The car hummed. Alvarez didn't so much as blink. I let the air out of my lungs in a slow stream and tasted metal. I did not speak. I did not move. I folded my palms in my lap and felt the thud of my pulse against the chain at my throat. Outside, Charleston's blue held the color of an answer I wasn't ready to say out loud. The night after the gala felt different, quieter in a way that hummed against my bones. Magnolia Gardens glowed under paper lanterns, each one trembling in the mild wind. The air smelled of lavender and old wood, and the pond mirrored the moon so clearly it was hard to tell which side was water and which was sky. I had come here for answers, not forgiveness. I found him near the statue of Justicia, half swallowed by moss. Her scales tilted, her blindfold darkened with rain stains. He stood facing the reflection, no glasses tonight, the white cane leaning against the bench beside him. My anger rose before my courage caught up. "You can see, can't you?" I said the words like stones thrown too late to take back. He didn't move for a beat. Then slowly he turned. The lantern light caught his eyes clear alive, nothing clouded or dim. "I used to see too much," he said, voice quiet as wind through reeds. "That's why I had to stop." He sat the movement careful, not ashamed. 15 years ago, I lost everything worth looking at. I stayed standing. That's not blindness. That's cowardice. Maybe he said, or maybe survival. When you've watched the world take your wife's face and turn it into a headline, you learn what hiding costs and what it saves. He told me then, not as defense, but as confession. About the leak, the data the corporations who had paid to bury him alive. about reporters camping outside his house flashing cameras like weapons, about his wife Elise who had driven away one night, followed by paparazzi until her car hit a tree. They said it was an accident. He said eyes on the water. But when I closed my eyes afterward, I saw her headlights in their lenses, so I closed them for good. I sat then because there was nothing noble in standing over grief. You faked a disability, I said softly, and built a fortress out of it. Would you have forgiven me if I'd said I did it to protect my daughter? He asked. Or would you call it another performance? I looked at the statue of Justicia, her scales uneven, her stone eyes covered. Maybe we all perform, I said. Some just get better reviews. We sat without speaking for a while, listening to crickets stitch the dark together. Then I told him about Frank, about the long hospital hallways, and the way Ronan had begun treating me like glass, right after the funeral. My son thinks control is the same as care, I said. He believes independence is something you can revoke with paperwork. Silas turned toward me, his face softened by the lantern glow. We are both living under other people's definitions of safety. His hand found mine on the bench, warm, steady, nothing suggestive about it, just human. The world labels us fragile, he said, but we are not porcelain. We are tempered glass. I wanted to pull back and didn't. The pond rippled when a breeze crossed it, and our joined reflection warped into one shape, half light, half shadow. So what happens now? I asked. Now, he said, I ask you to stay. Not for appearance, but because my enemies still think I'm blind. If they discover otherwise, they'll come for anyone close to me. They'll come for you first, I said, thinking I was clever. He shook his head. No, Vess. They'll come for you. You're new. You're interesting. And they'll make your truth their headline before I can stop them. He stood and leaned the cane against the bench again, but it was obvious now it was just a prop part of a costume he no longer needed. Alvarez appeared near the edge of the path, a dark shape under the hanging lanterns. We're being watched, he murmured. Silas nodded once. Then we go. His voice lowered when he turned back to me. If this ends badly, walk away. Let them call you Mrs. Mercer if it keeps you safe. But walk. I wanted to say something brave, something that proved I was more than the fragile woman he thought I was. But my throat locked. When I found my voice again, it came out as truth instead of courage. You're not the only one who's tired of being invisible. He stepped close enough that I could smell the faint trace of that same cedar scent from the dress box. Then don't vanish, he said. He kissed me once, gentle as punctuation, and just like that, all the anger I'd carried turned into something quieter and infinitely more dangerous. When Alvarez led us to the car, I didn't look back at the pond. I didn't want to see whether our reflections had separated. Later that night at home, my phone lit up on the counter. A message from an unknown number waited. Mrs. Mercer. How does it feel to live a lie? I turned off the screen, but the question stayed glowing in my chest. Morning came with the sound of fists on glass. Reporters outside my building shouted my name like it was part of a scandal instead of a person. The Southern Observer had run the headline in red, "The Blind Billionaire Who Watches Us All." Beneath it was a photo of me and Silas in the garden, his hand on mine, the statue of Justicia behind us. The image looked romantic, almost staged. I stood frozen until Ronan burst through my door holding a copy of the paper. "Mom, what the hell is this?" he said. "They're saying you're part of some elaborate fraud. Were you in on this? I was in on nothing," I said. I was trying to find my own life again by dating a man who lied to the entire country. His voice cracked in the middle, half fury, half fear. He lied to survive, I said. The world punished him for seeing too clearly, and now they'll punish you for helping him hide. He threw the paper onto my table and his face softened just enough to make the words hurt more. He's not worth what this will do to you. When he left, silence filled the apartment, heavy and electric. My phone rang again, this time Alvarez. "We need you downtown," he said. "Emergency board meeting." Mercer Vision's top floor was all glass and light of view of the Cooper River stretching into fog. The reflection of that headline glowed faintly in every pane. Sloan Mercer stood near the window, arms folded, every inch of her father's control distilled into poise. "We can fix this," she said. "We release a statement. Dad had an experimental surgery, miraculous recovery. The public loves redemption arcs." The company lawyer shook his head. "That's another lie, Ms. Mercer. One more and the SEC will bury you in lawsuits." "Then we spin it as privacy," she snapped. "He didn't deceive. He protected his family." "You mean he protected his guilt?" I said quietly. Every head turned. "If you build another lie on top of this one, it'll crush you," I said to Silas. He hadn't spoken yet, standing behind the long table with the white cane resting across it. His fingers tightened on the handle until his knuckles went pale. "If you keep hiding," I told him, "you'll be blind again, not in your eyes, but in your heart." The room stilled. Even Sloane's posture faltered. "Who exactly are you to give sermons in my boardroom?" she said. "Someone who stopped being afraid of being seen," I said. Silas's voice was low but decisive. "She's the first person to speak to me without pretending I'm something I'm not." The confession cracked the air like glass. Dad Sloan said, "Do you understand what happens if you admit this? The foundation collapses. Investors pull out. Everything you've built, gone." He turned to her. "Maybe that's the price of building it on silence." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Mercer." "The Observer isn't finished. The reporter Calder Knox claims to have video footage from the gala proving your site is fully restored. He's giving 48 hours before publication. A timer started somewhere in my head. Then we tell the truth before he does," I said. Sloan laughed without humor. "And let him paint you as the noble accomplice." "No, we fight this." The lawyer leaned forward. "You can't fight optics with denial anymore. You'll only make it uglier." The room erupted in voices, strategy, fear, calculation. Silas stood apart, still as marble. When the noise died down, he looked at me. "What do you think I should do?" "Tell them yourself," I said. "Not because they demand it, because you deserve to be the one who says it." "Truth doesn't fix everything," he murmured. "No," I said, "but it stops the bleeding." The meeting adjourned into fragments, lawyers to phone calls, executives to damage control. Sloan cornered Ronan near the elevator. "I caught only pieces. She's manipulating him, and my father trusts the wrong people." They didn't notice Alvarez watching from the hall. When the others cleared out, he slipped me a small flash drive sealed in plastic. "You'll want to see this before anyone else does," he said. I waited until night to open it. The laptop's glow painted the room silver. The file began with the gala video clear as memory. Silas walking, smiling, turning at my laughter before I finished breathing in. Then the camera panned wider, catching Sloan in a corner with Calder Knox, sliding a folder across a table, shaking his hand. The timestamp was 2 days before the first story broke. The folder's label read, "Transfer Agreement." She had signed over her father's controlling shares in exchange for exclusive editorial rights to manage the narrative. My breath hitched. The video ended with the sound of her voice, low but certain. "When this hits, I'll be ready." I sat back and let the screen dim. Outside, the river cut through Charleston like a sheet of mercury. I thought of the pond at Magnolia Gardens of the Moss, on the blindfolded statue of how justice doesn't vanish. It just waits for the light to move. Somewhere in that glass tower, Silas was choosing between his empire and his truth. Somewhere else, the people who loved us were turning us into headlines, and I, an old teacher with no power, had become the keeper of a secret that could destroy or redeem them both. I unplugged the flash drive and closed the laptop. The reflection in the screen showed my face split between shadow and light. "They'll come for you first," he'd said. He was right. But I was done living as someone else's decoy. The next morning, I would walk into that building, hand him the proof, and ask him to finally see the world as it was. The sun rose red over the Cooper, a warning and a promise all at once. Rain stitched the morning into a thin gray veil over downtown Charleston. From the front row beside Alvarez, I watched cameras multiply like barnacles along the glass of Mercer Vision's 40-story view. The room had the metallic smell of wet umbrellas and hot lights. My heart beat against my ribs with an energy that felt half fear, half pride. Silas stepped to the lectern with no cane, no escort, no dark lenses. A murmur ran the length of the hall and fell away. He set a pair of sunglasses on the table beside the microphone, like an artifact being returned. 15 years ago, he said, "Voice, even I went blind, but not in the way you think." Flashbulbs crackled. The rain ticked harder against the glass. He did not reach for notes. He reached backward into the night Elise died, into the barrage of cameras that followed his grief home, into the calculus that said erasing his own gaze might buy the one thing he couldn't purchase: peace. "I thought darkness would protect my family," he said. "It only made me invisible to them and to myself. I told a story about who I was so the world would leave me alone. Today, I am ending that story." Calder Knox, rose hair, perfectly out of place voice, sharpened for television. "So the country believed a fabrication so you could avoid accountability." The room leaned toward the word. Silas didn't flinch. "Not to avoid it," he said. "To survive long enough to face it. Survival is not the same as comfort. I accept the anger this will cause. I accept the losses that will come." He looked out over a sea of lenses and somehow found me, but I refused to keep asking the people I love to live inside my lie. A ripple moved through the press rows as another hand shot up. "Mr. Mercer, what about control of the company during these years? Were stakeholders misled?" Before legal could speak, Silas laid the white cane flat on the table with a small, decisive tap. "I am responsible for the misdirection. Not my board, not my staff." The tap echoed across the microphones like the end of a performance. Behind him, Sloan sat, statue-still knuckles pressed white together. A reporter pivoted toward her. "Ms. Mercer's sources allege a change in ownership structure ahead of today. Can you confirm?" She started to answer, eyes cutting to her counsel. Alvarez's hand brushed my sleeve, a cue. I slid the flash drive into his palm. In a few strides, he was at the side table with company counsel. A laptop opened. The general counsel's face drained as the footage played, then hardened into something disciplined. Clarification, the counsel said into a secondary mic. "We have evidence of an attempted transfer designed to capitalize on today's revelation. That effort is not authorized and corrective action is underway." A dozen lenses swiveled to Sloan. She lifted her chin. "I protected enterprise value when my father refused to," she said. "Stability isn't betrayal." Her voice was steady. Her eyes were glass. From the back, another voice cut through. Ronan. He had pushed into the media pack credentials dangling crooked from his neck. "Respect dies by degrees," he said, loud enough to carry. "I know because I watched it happen in my own home. My mother asked to be consulted, not handled. That's all anyone here is asking. Tell us the whole truth and let us decide if we can live with it." Heads turned. Cameras found me. Mrs. Hale, a woman near the aisle, called, "Were you part of the deception?" I stood feeling Alvarez like a lighthouse at my shoulder. "No," I said. "I was part of the waking. He isn't the only one who stopped hiding this year." Microphones tilted in my direction. Rainlight silvered the floor. My hands did not shake. Calder lifted a new sheet. "I have footage from the gala. You moved like a sighted man, Mr. Mercer." Silas didn't bother looking at the screen they queued up. "I did," he said, "because I am. And because I was done pretending in front of the one person who refused to treat me like glass." His gaze found me again and held. Somewhere behind the press risers, a producer hissed, "We're live. Stay on him." Questions layered regulators, donors, victims of bad faith. Silas answered what he could and carried the blame for what he couldn't. When someone asked whether he would resign, he didn't confer. Yes, he said. The room inhaled. Effective immediately. An independent council will select interim leadership. The foundation will undergo full external review. I will fund what I broke and step back from what I built. Sloane's breath caught a sound only the front row could hear. Calder turned his camera bright smile to her. The council intercepted with a statement about continuity. Outside, thunder rumbled low across the harbor. Inside, the only sound was shutters and rain. Silas picked up the sunglasses, looked at them for a long second, then set them back down and stepped away from the lectern. He came straight down the center aisle while reporters shouted his name as if volume could rewind the morning. When he reached my row, he stopped. Up close, I could see the water in his eyes and the years lifting off his shoulders like a coat. "Now I can see you," he said, voice barely a breath. Truly. The room flashed white around us. For a heartbeat, the light was so intense it hurt. Outside the doors, alarms metaphorical and otherwise were already ringing. Inside me, something went quiet and steady. Shame had burned off. Fear had followed it. What remained was simple and blinding, the certainty that whatever came next, we would face it without costumes. Autumn made the air clean again. A year had smoothed the edges off headlines and left the city's colors sharper. Brick, deeper, river, truer, the live oaks burnished dark. The ad above the bench on Meeting Street no longer sold vacations. It read in plain white letters on navy, live truthfully. I traced the words with my eyes and smiled at the shamelessness of it. He was already there when I arrived, seated at the end of the bench like any other man on any other afternoon. No glasses. A newspaper folded into thirds. "Do I still pass for a blind recluse?" he asked without looking up. "Not with that tie," I said, and he laughed in a way I'd only heard in private, the kind that admits survival without bragging about it. He folded the paper and pulled a small box from his jacket. The sapphire inside was the exact blue of the dress he'd sent me on the day my life shifted lanes. Not a promise of darkness, he said, but of sight, of being looked at and looking back. He didn't kneel, this wasn't theater. I didn't cry, this wasn't rescue. I put my hand out steady. Yes, I said, because we had already done the hard part. Footsteps on the curb made us both turn. Ronan crossed with a woman at his side carrying a linen envelope. Sloane. Time had sanded them too. "We brought your invitation," Ronan said, a half grin, peeking through the old worry. Sloane handed me the card. The Light Project. Opening night. A joint initiative under a new board programs for access and literacy, with my name in small print under educational advisor. "We tried to protect you both," Sloane said, looking between me and her father. "We only locked you in. We're learning." It wasn't absolution, it was better accountability. They left us to the gold of late light. Across the street, Magnolia's Corner put out its last tray of cinnamon rolls. The air held butter and river and coming cold. A city bus sighed to a stop, doors yawning open. Route 15, Sullivan's Island, the driver called. He tipped his cap and grinned. Alvarez, of course. The universe had a sense of humor when you survived long enough to appreciate it. "Shall we go home?" Silas asked, holding out his hand like the simplest question in the world. I thought of every room where I had been talked over, every form I had signed to make other people feel safe, every morning since the press conference when I had chosen not to apologize for being alive. I stepped up onto the bus. The engine thrummed. The bridge rose ahead, thin and bright against a sky that had finally decided on blue. Through the window, Meeting Street slid backward the bench, shrinking to a comma at the end of a sentence I no longer needed to reread. Alvarez checked the mirror and smiled at us, the way a man smiles when a plan comes together a year late and right on time. Ronan and Sloane would handle the opening tonight, their names together on a program neither of them could have written alone. A fund in Elise's name would launch this winter. The papers would call it elegant. I would spend my mornings with children who read with their fingers and their ears and their tenacious hearts, and my afternoons on a porch that faced water wide enough to teach you perspective. Silas slipped the ring onto my finger as the bus eased up the incline, the sapphire catching a ray and throwing it back in stubborn light. He rested his palm over mine. The glass reflected us, a woman and a man, faces lined with years. We stopped pretending not to have eyes, bright with a kind of youth that has nothing to do with time. I looked out at the river and let the salt air find its way into all the places that had once felt sealed. Once I'd believed love belonged to people with fresh faces and unbroken futures. Now I understood love arrives when you have something true to offer it. The bus crested the bridge. Charleston spread behind us, honest and shining. Ahead, the island waited, and the road made no promises it didn't plan to keep.